Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bottom Turtle Podcast. I'm Dr. Shannon Ray, and I am currently talking directly into my phone. And that is because my son, who is 2 years old, came into my office and took the cord that connects my microphone to my computer. And it is late, and I want to make sure and get this episode up tonight. I don't want to be up all night trying to look for a cord. I want to get some sleep. I got work in the morning. So I had to bite the bullet and just record it on my phone. And so this new format, since I'm doing it on my own, is supposed to go, I take a recording that I take from my phone. And usually it's on my phone because it's just easier whenever the inspiration comes to pick up my phone and start talking into it. Or it's also from my phone because I just have a crap ton of recordings on my phone. And so I listen to them and I go, oh, this would make a good episode. And then I throw it up on the internet. And so typically in that format, the idea is I would take my setup with my microphone and everything, making the audio nice and polished. I would take that and I would do some sort of commentary or review over the audio that is going to be presented for the episode. And so I was clinging to the idea of having clean audio for the intro, like a little, hey, welcome to the podcast, have some clean audio for the intro, and then have it go into the recorded audio on my phone. But because my microphone's not working, this is what I have to do. So yeah. But luckily enough, I don't really have much to say. This current episode that I'm about to upload, it has a few things in it. It talks about my credentials and as a scientist and kind of just some of the accomplishments I've had in my life, and some of the accomplishments I've had, and to try to frame why anyone should listen to me. And not to say anyone should listen to me just because, oh, look what I've accomplished, you should listen to me. It's more like I'm trying to communicate that I live in a world of math, that I have done the work to have authority in that space such that I have created some pretty interesting works of art with some pretty prominent people in the space. And, some of the work that I've published, I've worked with Shin-Tung Yao at Harvard and Mu Tao Wong at Columbia, and I've had papers published with them. And it's funny because there's a part of me, like, where was it 3 years into the podcast, and I've never mentioned the fact that I've published papers with somebody like Shin-Tung Yao. When I worked with him, he was the department chair of mathematics at Harvard, and he's also a Fields medalist. And so a Fields medalist is kind of like a Nobel Prize in mathematics. Since they don't have a Nobel Prize in mathematics, the Fields medalist is like one of the top awards that can be given. And I don't mention these things largely because there's a part of my mind that's saying, like, are these really trophies worth mentioning? Like, and it's usually framed, like, it's usually from the perspective of the rest of the community, like the rest of the science community. Like, if someone heard that I was like proud, like one of my proudest moments and some of my proudest accomplishments were, working with a Fields medalist and being invited to Harvard after I got my PhD to spend the day with them and give a talk on my thesis work. And I don't know, it's just part of me feels like, is this really a big accomplishment? Like, one thing you have to understand about me is that I am an overthinker. I overthink everything. And part of these episodes now, like I said, they're meant to be more intimate, and they're meant for me to practice letting go of trying to control everything about how people see me, and just to speak sincerely and from the heart. And some of the things that I'm most proud of is some of this work that I've done. And so in this recording, you're going to be hearing me talk about that and kind of explaining what the implications are of that in terms of me being a creator in the space of mathematics and science, and like what character I am, what spirits have I embodied, and because of the spirits I've embodied, what authority I have to speak on behalf of those spirits. Like, I have authority to speak on behalf of the spirits of algebra and reasoning and logic and, you know, and so sometimes you probably hear this often in these recordings. You'll hear me bring up my credentials, but they're not designed to brag. They're more like a person with insecurities trying to like convince themselves that they're worth listening to. So that's something you're going to get out of this episode. Some other things you're going to get out of this episode is me discussing more from a religious context, just discussing why we should take religion seriously, how good it would feel if people could let go of their hatred or their disgust or their frustration with people who are religious. You know, people often think that they're stupid. Like, why would you believe this? Why would you believe this stuff? You're an idiot for believing it. And I'm kind of trying to make an argument for why I have religious beliefs, like why I believe in Christianity, why I believe in Buddhism, and have that explanation be within the context of the podcast as a whole. Where, like, if you listen to our episode, pointing in the continuum, the idea is that we're trying to remove all the supernatural, so and then make arguments for concepts like God that have existed, concepts like spirit. Like, these are concepts that have existed in most human societies. Most people have some word for these things. And so it's like they developed for a reason and people use them for a reason. And so it's like, how do I interact with these concepts in the most sincere way as possible so that I can see with the sight provided by looking at reality through that lens, and also hear people for which that lens is their primary lens for looking at reality. And the idea is that if you can hear those people sincerely, then you can understand that they're not crazy and that their perspectives are valid and that they have something worthwhile to communicate and share. And then once you have that feeling like, oh my God, no, these people, they really do have something valuable to say, then your heart opens up and the negativity and the hatred dissipates. And that's just something that it's like a plea for people to kind of be able to adjust their mind to be able to hear that. So that's pretty much the flavor of this particular ramble for this episode. I don't really need to go into much more detail, I think. The last thing I do want to say is, if you guys remember from the episode Spirits and Waveforms, I talk about this show that we watched, that Eunice and I watched, called, it's about Madam C.J. Walker, who was a black woman in America who became, I think, the first millionaire. You know, she'd made hair products. And the thing that really stuck out to me when I watched that show was how well they communicated her need to speak, to tell her story. And when you watch that show, she has this undying desire, like this undying devotion to, I need to tell my story. I need to, she believes in herself completely. And it's like, that is what you have to do to accomplish things. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to, but that process requires exposing yourself. It requires opening yourself up to your belief in yourself. And then, for the average person, they may look at your belief in yourself and be like, huh, who does this person think they are, thinking that they're going to become something big? Who do they think they are, thinking that they're important enough that people should listen to them? Who do they think they are, And so there's a part of your mind that always says, well, yeah, I have to, why should people listen to me? But that's kind of the point of this episode, where I'm trying to communicate, hey, no, I think people really should listen to me. I've been studying physics and math for so many years, and I know a lot of scientists and mathematicians. I know these people. It's like my average day is just dealing with these people living in these worlds, talking about, high level mathematics every single day. And so I know how they think. I know how they are. And everyone's different. Everyone has something to bring. Some people are more stronger analytically. They can take the machinery of a mathematical concept or a physical concept and they can break it down immediately, and then they can rebuild it and with like little effort, and it's just really impressive. But sometimes the drawback to that is you don't necessarily think out of the box as much, or you don't allow yourself to entertain more exotic ideas. And my mind has always been one that it thinks big, like it always thinks beyond, but my mathematical aptitude, like it's sufficient, it's not like the greatest, but it's good. Like I can handle abstract concepts. I can break things down, but I do it a little slower. Like it takes me more time to be able to get comfortable using a concept and like being certain that I know how to use it properly, because as I've mentioned before, I'm a bit of a coward. And so I'm always like, oh, am I using this right? I'm an overthinker. I overthink everything. And so my analytical aptitude, it's good, but I'm a little slower, I'm just a little slower, but I do have this capacity to think outside the box. So I know that the way I think about mathematics and these things is just different than most scientists. Like, and I do meet some every once in a while, but these are people who are scientists who are also more philosophically oriented. So they're more capable of thinking in more exotic terms, I guess. But the point is that I'm trying to make is that I am someone who has something important to say. And I think that I've discovered some pretty significant things about reality. And I desperately want to communicate them to people, because I think that in our society right now, we're at something like a crossroads. We're at a crossroads where we can either go and prosper and master our technology and become godlike beings and potentially create realities that are indistinguishable from this reality and create consciousness and to flourish given this power. Like we have the capacity for that, or we have the capacity of being destroyed by our technology and having a great calamity and having our civilization either destroyed or set back, beyond what we would even imagine, And I think we're at a crossroads right now with the technology, with the artificial intelligence, with the degree to which we're understanding quantum computing. Like everything that we're doing at this moment is I think beyond our current social maturity. And unless we figure out how to be more mature and to love each other and to see each other as one, and to not spread negativity and to not encourage people's hearts to war and stop using people as objects to feel self-righteous. Like we have to stop doing this. I don't see how we don't kill ourselves if we don't stop. Like to me, I have kids now. Like I want my kids to have a future. And I don't see the polarization and the division and the dispersion of realities. The fact that we don't all live in the same reality, like we're in these information bubbles. We don't have a shared spirit. Like we are moving away from each other at a faster rate every day with all the connectivity, all the information. I can gather more data and just go further and further away from a reality from somebody else. And then I use those people who aren't in my reality as objects to feed my ego. And if everyone does that, I don't see how we don't kill each other. There needs to be a mechanism that corrects for this. And I feel like my message that I'm trying to communicate has the capacity to be that corrective. And so I have to communicate it. And I mentioned that I'm talking about religious ideas, but when you listen to the podcast as a whole, my arguments, like I'm trying to do it in a way that's completely reasonable. Like I'm trying to construct an algebraic structure using my understanding of mathematics, a language that takes these concepts and makes them so precise and undeniable that it would be as crazy as saying something like, I'm not a physicist, or I'm not married to my wife. Like if someone comes to me and says that, oh, you're not married to Eunice, you're not married to your wife. If someone said that, everyone would look at them like they were crazy. Because my marriage to my wife is as objectively true as if you drop a rock near the surface of the earth, it's going to accelerate at 9.8 meters per second squared. You'd be crazy to deny that as reality. And so I'm trying to construct concepts and ideas to where it would be impossible to deny the truth value of them, the truth of them. And so I'm trying to take these concepts and I'm trying to frame them in that framework so that I can make arguments about why religion should be taken seriously from a place of reason. Because I don't know if I've mentioned this to people, but one of the things that brought me down this path was the question of whether it's possible to reason to religion. Is it possible to reason to God? And when I started going on that journey, I was convinced that it was impossible. But I wasn't completely certain. Like when I was actually on the journey, I knew that to have an honest inquiry, to go on this journey, to ask this question sincerely, I have to be open to the idea that it is possible. And so I went around talking to, when I thought I was an atheist, I went around talking to religious people and asking them, about what they believed and why, and seeing whether or not it's possible to reason to religion. And eventually, when I started studying information theory, it's like all of my spiritual philosophies that I had been developing all collapsed into this one concept, like information. And then I started seeing how you can reason toward it, because the truth of reality is that there's always entropy, there's always uncertainty. And the thing that causes fear and frustration is the fear of the unknown, the fear of the future. If I communicate this to people, how will it be received? Will my reputation be destroyed because I sound like a crazy person? Or will people accept it and say, oh, there's something undeniably true here? And I can't be certain about that, but there's a certain point where you have to just be like, okay, well, I've communicated these ideas to enough people and I get the same feedback every time. And so there's a certain point where you just have to have the courage to go into the unknown and create reality. And so once you understand that you need faith to go into the unknown when there's an uncertainty about the future, that it's rational to be irrational. It's only rational to have a dream and then put everything you have into it, to have an ideal, put everything you have into it and just believe. Even if there's no objective reason to believe that it will work out, sometimes people go on their dreams and they fail. But the point is that to be able to irrationally believe in yourself is the thing that is the difference between whether or not you create the reality you're trying to create. And so it's completely rational to believe on faith and to believe with that when there's not evidence, because there's never full information. This is why the faith component is so important. And once you understand that, it's like, okay, well, what do I have faith in? Does the thing that I have faith in, will it take care of me? Will it love me? Am I putting faith in something that is processing data to put me in a worse position? Like, what is the correct answer? What should I believe in? What should I believe in to fill in the gap of ignorance that's always ever present, that can never be removed, but you can have the capacity to go into that unknown, into the entropy, into the uncertainty, into the void, into the chaos, and create order. And so you have to believe that, I don't know, I'm kind of rambling right now, but the whole point is that I think there has to be a language that brings everyone together as one. This is part of what's going to be discussed in this episode. What is the code? What is the algorithm that brings everyone together at one so that we all have a shared language, a shared spirit, so that we can communicate to each other in a way to where we all have the ability to contribute our truth, our knowledge, to the knowledge of the whole, so that the whole can take care of itself. How do we process data so that we thrive together? Yeah. Anyway, this little rant went on longer than I thought. I actually, before I started this, wasn't certain I'd have much to say. I was overthinking things like I always do, but I picked up my phone and just started talking to it. And I think that I got more out than I expected. So I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. Anyway, hope you guys enjoy the episode. I think that this little ramble is a little more coherent than the last one, even though I think the last one turned out pretty good. Thank you, everyone, for your support who continue listening to the podcast. I was actually pretty happy to see that we have some listeners from Australia, and when I uploaded the new episode, they were the first to download it and listen. So I thought that was really cool. So I appreciate you guys. And if anything in this podcast speaks to you and you get something out of it and it's helpful, please leave a review. Please tell someone that you know who might like to check it out. Rate it if you can. Whatever podcast app you're using to listen to it, please rate it. Please leave a review. It really helps, and I really want this thing to be successful. So if you've built any connection or relationship to me and my ideas and the podcast as a whole, and you want to do something to repay me and to pay me back for what I've given to you, doing those things would help. Rate it, tell a friend, give a review. It's not I'm not asking for money, and it's something free you can do. And also, if you could share this on your social media, because lately I've been posting more clips and stuff lately. So if you come across a clip of the podcast that I've uploaded on social media and you're a fan, please hit the share button. Please hit the like button. It really helps, and it costs you nothing. It's absolutely free, and it means a lot to me. Like, that small gesture means a lot. So if you could do that, I would be very grateful. And with nothing else to say, please enjoy my ramble. I think I'm entitling it, Take Religion Seriously. Peace. Hello, everybody. Yep. I just decided to start talking into my phone again. I haven't done that in a while. It's actually interesting. So, as everyone may know, recently Oyani left the podcast. Yeah. So recently Oyani left the podcast. And so this whole point of this podcast for me it's always been something that I have to do. I don't know if people really understand that. I don't have a choice. The best way I can explain this, and it's correlated to a lot of data. There's an archive of it. Anyone can look this up. But the best way I can explain this is, do you guys remember that commercial for NOS energy drink? I'm pretty sure that's what it was for. And it's a commercial of I think it was an old man with a lot of scars. And then he just looks all messed up walking to a locker room, I think. And then he starts reversing. And while he's reversing, there's this speech about living your life and gaining your scars. And then he reverses back into a younger age. And it's like, go get your scars. Live your life. And to me, that signals that you only have one life. Actually do something, make mistakes, get scars, because scars come from going on adventures. Scars come from losses and damage during triumph, damage during living, damage during exploring, damage during being alive, essentially. And so that commercial is telling you, you only have one life, go live it. And when I saw that commercial, I knew in that moment that I had to get my scars. I had to go out into the world and I had to live my life. And so one time when I was at doing jiu-jitsu, an older man was sitting in on the class, because sometimes people sit in on the class to see whether or not they want to take it. And so we just finished rolling, or I think I was sitting out around. I think it was my turn to sit out around or something. I don't remember. And I sat next to the dude, and the guy was like, "Hey, let me ask you a question. Why do you do this? What motivated you to do this?" And I told him, basically, the NOS commercial. I didn't tell him the NOS commercial, but I told him, I was like, "Oh, because I have to. I don't want to be sitting down when I'm older, looking back on my life and not having done this. That just sounds too painful. Sounds like a tragedy. I can't do it." So the moment I walked past this MMA gym, which was next to the comic book shop that I used to go to, Storytellers Comics in Whitesboro, I used to go there to play Magic the Gathering. And I walked by one Friday night, like I do any other Friday night, because it was my local game shop. Friday, you go play Magic. That's what you do on Fridays. So I walked by the gym. I walked by the gym as I was walking in too, because it was in the plaza, the same like strip mall plaza. And I saw an MMA gym. I was like, how the fuck did I not notice this before? How did I not notice there was an MMA gym right here? It's just right there, right next to my mat. And so I was like, I have to walk in. I have no choice. It's over. It's over. The universe has now evolved the way it evolves. I walked in there and it's like, hey, what does it take to enroll? Just come in, sit on a class. All right. I walked into the comic book shop and it's like, I'm going to train MMA. They're like, what? Like, yeah, there's the MMA shop right there. The universe just told me I had to do it. Like, oh, okay. Like literally the next week I was at that gym, and that's how I started doing jiu-jitsu. So when I'm talking about the fact that I have to do this podcast, this is the emotional state. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm talking about. Like, God is telling me I need to communicate something to people. I've discovered something important and people need to know about it. My job title, I am a researcher. I think it's a postdoctoral researcher, but I'm a researcher. I research about reality. More specifically, I'm an information theorist. More specifically, I'm a quantum information theorist. More specifically, I'm a theoretical physicist. I have published papers in the fields of general relativity, studying the energy of curved spacetimes near the event horizon, where they're rotating at almost maximum angular momentum, using the Wang and Yao quasi-local energy developed by Shen-Tung Yao at Harvard, who's a Fields medalist, and Mu-Tao Wang at Columbia, both mathematicians. And I used their theory to study the energy of curved black holes near the event horizon. That's how I got my PhD. That's why I am Dr. Ray. Also, for my PhD, I did research on computational geometry. So I am also a programmer. These are my spirits. These are the spirits I embody. I speak for them. They let me speak for them because I have obeyed their laws. They are my gods. They are what animate me. I am that spirit. And so I also did computational geometry, where I created the adiabatic isometric mapping algorithm, which does isometric embeddings of triangulated two surfaces with S2 topology, spherical topology, into R3. It's an extraordinarily elaborate algorithm. I literally found a global minima within a space with many global minima that was over 9,000 dimensions. It's not 9,000 dimensions. I wrote an algorithm that finds a specific isometric embedding to demonstrate the Alexandrov embedding, which is a discrete form of the Pogolarov embedding theorem based off of the Weil embedding problem. How many people have ever heard of these words? Who have ever heard of Alexandrov or Pogolarov, the Russian mathematicians who helped resolve the Weil embedding problem? So I wrote an algorithm that produces an Alexandrov embedding. This is the world I live in. That world of math, I am that God. That is me. It speaks to you, the spirit that can do these things. That is me. And so, all these spirits that I have pledged my fealty to through discipline and years and years and years of study, what else would you think it would take to be able to embody the spirit of these things? And so, I have discovered a lot of truths about reality. It's literally my job. I have published papers on the computational geometry, general relativity, with Ivy League professors. I've published a paper in Physical Review A, the maximum advantage of quantum illumination, which got selected as an editor's choice. I published a paper in Entropy, my most recent paper, on a new differential geometric approach to quantum ignorance with entropic properties consistent with statistical mechanics. The featured paper. and entropy. And since then, I've been asked to do more featured papers because that thing had almost 4,000 views in like 2 or 3 months. Which, if you go look on their website, tell me how many other publications have that many views that fast. And so I'm saying these things because, like, again, this all started because I was talking about how Oyani left the podcast, and the podcast continues and moves forward without him because I have no choice. I have to do this. I can't not. Nothing will stop that. And so now we're into this format where I talk into my phone. Talking into my phone again. And this, what I'm doing right now, may be what sustains my family. Because I truly believe that no one has these ideas. Not in the way that I articulate them. And if someone is listening to this is the first recording they've ever listened to of me, then you have to understand that everything I'm saying is put in the context of the podcast, because the podcast is my spirit. The podcast is my soul. The podcast is my thesis of reality. The podcast is how my brain functions. Once you understand that the podcast is just you inside of my mind, and you understand that everything I'm saying is merely the spirit that animates me at all moments of any day, and it's just me. Once you understand that the ideas that I come up with that go into that podcast is literally just me existing. It's just what my mind does automatically. It turns everything into math. Because I've been studying math for so long, and I do it with sincerity, and I do it with honesty. And so from these experiences, I've gained, I think, some deep insight into what reality is. It's literally my job to discover reality. I literally do the same job as Albert Einstein. Maybe not as well as him, but I literally do the same job as Albert Einstein. That is my job. If you want to know what I do for a living, that is my job. And I say that quite literally because I've published in the theory of general relativity, one of his most famous, most celebrated theories of reality. That's how I got my name, Dr. Ray. I know Einstein's spirit in ways that most people could never even imagine. And there are people who understand it in ways that I can't even imagine. But everyone has their relationship to it. You either see it in popular, it's a brand, it's an image. Who has never heard of Albert Einstein? One of the most famous human beings who've ever lived on the planet. Period. And most people, I'd imagine, see him as a pop figure. Like, they probably couldn't tell you anything that he's done to become that famous. They just know he's really smart, and that people who are called Einsteins are smart. So I'm not saying that I'm an Einstein, but I am saying that I got my name Dr. Ray from publishing work in his theory with a Fields medalist. So, I mean, like I said, when I graduated from my grad school, the first talk I was invited to give was at Harvard by Shin-Tung Yao. It's one of my favorite experiences ever. Because once you understand that for someone like me who's from Kansas, and I've mentioned this in recording before, Harvard is this place that just doesn't have anything to do with my reality, being from Kansas. Because it feels like the rest of the world is happening outside and you're just kind of like here where nothing interesting happens. Celebrities don't show up there. You know, it's not a very happening place. Let me just put it that way. It's fucking Kansas. And so when you're watching movies as a child from Kansas, from the most basic middle class background you could imagine, I am the most basic American that can ever be. You couldn't imagine a more basic American. The most basic. The vacations, the Christmases, like every single bit of Americana you can imagine as a lived experience of American, that's just my life. The most basic American on earth. And so, being the most basic American on earth, from Kansas, not much happens. So you watch something like Legally Blonde, or you watch How High, or you watch any of these movies that take place at like MIT or Harvard, and these are just places that have nothing to do with you. This is where powerful, elite, and really smart people go. You don't belong there. And it's not even that you don't belong there because of anything other than the fact that you're from Kansas. Shit doesn't, like, you're from Kansas. You're just a basic ass person from Kansas. That's the feeling. It has nothing to do with anything other than that. You're a basic ass person from Kansas. And so when you end up just working and people tell you when you're young, work really hard and you'll achieve your dreams. Yeah. And you're just like, okay. And I'm going to be a fireman. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be an astronaut. I'm going to be a scientist. Literally, that's just it. Like I said, I'm the most basic American you've ever imagined in your life. The most basic. And so you just kind of go down that path mindlessly. I'm going to be a fit. You don't even think about what you're doing. You just do it. And then you find yourself getting invited to Harvard to have lunch and talk about your thesis or your thesis work on black holes and isometric embeddings. It's bananas. It's absolutely bananas. Like, I'm an expert on isometric embeddings. If you actually go to my Instagram, you can see Play Papa Pa. I should probably put it on Bottom Turtle too, but if you go to my Instagram, I have these videos of my algorithms working, and you can see this circle evolving into these weird shapes, like bean-looking shapes and drum-looking shapes, and one of them is literally, and I kid you not, a Kerr black hole rotating at a Kerr event horizon of a Kerr black hole rotating about 99% its maximum angular momentum. The most approximate it could possibly get. You can see it. You can see it caving in at the poles where the negative Gaussian curvature comes in. And I say these words understanding that most people have no idea what they mean. But if you're a mathematician or you're a scientist and you hear these words and you understand that I know them and that I have published in these spaces, you will know who I am. If you understand what I'm saying when I talk about Gaussian curvature, the event horizon of Kerr black holes, the geometry, the metric that describes it, the limit for which after you reach a certain angular momentum, the event horizon is no longer embeddable in Euclidean 3 space due to the negative Gaussian curvature at the poles. Like, think about this. How many people on the planet could hear this cold and go, oh, I know what he's talking about. How many people on the planet know the work of Martinez on this? It's like this world seems like something when I was a child that just didn't actually, it was like so far away. And when you've actually like reached it, it's almost like you're in a dream world. But it really is one of those things where you have a goal from the age of 15, and then you get to 30 years old, 15 years you were on this path, and you accomplish it, and you're like, okay, now what? And you're just left thinking, okay, well, I achieved my dream. It was only, I didn't really think what I was going to do past this. The only thing I imagined is that I was going to go discover something about reality that's really important. And there was no anything beyond that. And so wanting to spend my time communicating my ideas comes from all this years of experience of sincerely interacting with the spirits of science and mathematics to gain their power and gain their sight so that I can create and become a god of those worlds, so that I have authority to create, authority through my works of art that demonstrate my spirit. Now that I have come to become this person, it's like I think I've discovered some really important things about reality and how they work and how they function. And the base spirit that I have to give all thanks to, the one that did all of the work, the one that deserves all the praise and all the glory, is Jesus Christ. There's just no one else to thank. It's clearly Jesus. Once you understand that I was raised Christian and that the example of Christianity handed down to me by my parents was one that was very consistent with the Spirit of Christ, such that you try to be sincere in loving the people as much as you can. You know right from wrong. It's a really good model for right and wrong. He's a very loving spirit, the spirit of truth and kindness and love. The Spirit of God in the Bible. The Spirit that tells you to love life despite the fact that you're going to suffer. Take your suffering, take your burden, and do it with joy and happy and love for life and love for God. Don't become bitter. Don't become resentful. Be grateful. Count your blessings. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God has done. I love that song. It's my favorite song I used to sing as a kid. One of the first times I got to have the activity of singing that I really enjoyed was when we used to sing it for church. I used to love it. I used to have such much fun. It's my favorite part of church was singing. I loved it. It was my favorite thing. Matter of fact, I wonder if that has to do with my love for singing now. Maybe it came from that. I don't know. I love to sing. Singing is it's one of those deep blessings from God that you have to, like, once you learn to appreciate it, your eyes open up to how grateful you should be and how beautiful the world is. Just the fact that you can do that alone should give you so much gratitude. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God has done. And you have to imagine that there's a little kid who's just singing that with pure joy, trusting everything his parents tells him, trusting their law, trusting their word, and then knowing that that religion that they gave you was out of love because they love you. That's the reason why. And once you know that that comes directly from the love of your parents, it's really hard to dismiss it, deny it. And then when you know that the reason why you're able to have such a sincere relationship with truth and to be loving is because you were raised Christian, and that even though you thought you were an atheist for so many years, you never gave up on your principles to Christ. So it was only by name that I was an atheist, but I was no atheist. I've never been an atheist. Once you finish your childhood dream and it no longer distracts you, and you start taking on real burdens in life, and you don't know what to do next, and then you start looking back to your parents, and you start looking at what they gave you, and you start just using that to get through your day. Then you start reflecting on what they gave you in their love. Then you understand where you came from, and you understand that you're Christian and you never had a choice, and you are lucky. And so this is my testimony. This is my reality. This is my spirit. All of it comes from fealty and loyalty to Jesus Christ. And then it's like, I can only imagine an atheist telling me that I'm an idiot or I'm wrong. Only a stupid person would believe this. And it's just like, you have no idea. You just have no idea. You have no idea how powerful Christ is. It's just insane. I feel like once you understand that, you'll probably be a happier person. Only in the way, and I mean that in this sense, not that you'll understand it and then you'll become Christian. That's not what I'm saying. You'll understand it, and then all of your love, all of your anger and hatred for people who could believe in something so stupid will disappear. And once that barrier between you and your fellow man goes down, and you understand that the people who believe this are not stupid or not crazy, and that what they believe in actually is the animating spirit that gives them joy and happiness and keeps them grounded and loving, and keep them as loving people and guides them to make good decisions. And then you understand that no one's perfect, and that the main lesson of Christianity is to accept that no one's perfect and love them and be happy about it. Because any relationship with anything is going to have a cost. That cost is going to produce waste, and that waste is going to be painful, just like a heat engine. Imagine we're just a collection of heat engines connected to each other. Each relationship, you put in some resource, it gives you a benefit and it has waste. That's the cost. And so once you understand that everything has a cost, which causes pain, which causes suffering, and that the observation of that does not negate something's value or a person's value, and you accept it, and then you love them and you're happy with the joy, even if you think they're wrong. Are they hurting you? Are they trying to be good people? What's the best way to interact with them such that everyone's happy? It's just merely the fact that once you can understand why someone would want to ever be religious, then all of that anger and all, can you just imagine it melting away? Can you just imagine if every person on the R Atheism subreddit just took in a deep breath and exhaled and all of their negative emotions toward religion were gone? It would be the most beautiful thing. And I feel like this is what I want to communicate. How do I give people the code so that we can all have a shared spirit to live in a shared reality that is ethical and fair to everyone, that is loving and that is objective, without lies and delusion? What's the code? What's the code for everyone to see each other as one? Is it to understand that all cells are dependently originated? Because people may not know, but I also consider myself a Buddhist. People did not know that. Yes, I am a Buddhist Christian. I love the Dharma. The Dharma. The Four Noble Truths. They are quite noble indeed. Because the idea in Buddhism of dependent origination is the understanding that nothing exists without its relationship to something else. It's an information theoretic statement. Information only makes sense with relationship. I could explain to you exactly how. Using only math, I could explain this. Not religious, just math. If you would like to hear it, I've explained it many a times, so I have to retread already covered grounds. It gives me less enthusiasm to explore, but I'll try to be quick with my explanation of how information is relationships. Okay, so imagine a completely white two-dimensional plane that goes off into infinity in every direction. It's just a two-dimensional plane that's just white, or it's all black. The whole point is that no point is distinguishable from any other point. Then imagine that you take a very pointy needle tip and you somehow are able to place it exactly perpendicular to that surface such that it touches one point in quotes, but whatever the surface area of the tip of that pin is, let's call that a point. And then from that point, the words let x squared plus y squared equals 1 are spoken, and suddenly a circle appears. So there's an x-axis emanating from that point, a y-axis emanating from that point, and then a circle appears such that x squared plus y squared equals 1. That's the constraint data. That constraint data is the only information you have that distinguishes all of those points from every other point on that two-dimensional infinite white plane. So now imagine that the x, y axes are gone. And the only thing you have is a circle and say the center of that circle. Okay. So from here, it is the case that if you were to rotate that circle about its axis in the center, imagine it's rotating clockwise. If you were to be looking at that circle and you're rotating it clockwise and it's a perfect circle, it would be impossible for you to tell that the circle is rotating. Because if you could tell the surface is rotating, then there's something about one point and over another point that tells you that something's moving. This is called a symmetry transformation. Symmetry transformations are transformations such that when the transformation is completed, you can't tell that a transformation had been completed. Because if you could tell a transformation had been completed, it's not symmetric. So a perfect example is taking a square and rotating it 90 degrees. You wouldn't be able to tell that it had been rotated. So what that means is that there is no information that distinguishes any point from any other point because they're all consistent or symmetric with the constraint data. Let x squared plus y squared equal 1, which is the equation for a circle. The constraint data. Now imagine, given this circle, you mark one point on that circle as red. Like, now that point's distinguishable because it's red and all the other ones are just black, So that's distinguishable. And then imagine that you rotate it clockwise and you can see the circle rotating clockwise. And so you go, look, I can see that the circle's rotating now because the red point is moving as it rotates. But then imagine that as it rotates and you're looking directly above it, that you rotate and with the circle as it rotates, such that the red point looks fixed. Okay, so from there, again, you can't tell the circle's rotating because the red point is a singular point. It has no relationship to anything. And so from there, you still have not broken the symmetry. So now imagine that you make a blue point and that sits on top of the red point. So the red point is sitting at its initial position. A blue point is placed there. But when you rotate the circle, the blue point doesn't move. The blue point stays in the same spot, but the red point moves. Now you can distinguish the red point from the blue point using an angle. That's what angles. You see an angle between the red point and the blue point. And so the angle goes from 0 to 360 degrees. And so now, because you've chosen blue to be fixed, you can define red in reference to its relationship to blue. And that allows you to now distinguish all the points. Whereas before you had the fixed blue, you wouldn't be able to tell that a rotation was occurring. So it's the relationship between the blue point and the red point that actually creates information. So now I can distinguish a point using this extra dial, if you will, called an angle. So the point is that the idea that everything's dependently originated is consistent with the idea of information, because information is created when you have a relationship when you have a reference frame. When you have a reference frame between two things, that's when you can break the symmetry, make relationship, and then now you can have information. And so the idea that all spirits are dependently originated, meaning that no spirit is singular, because anything singular is empty. Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisvaha. Gone, completely gone, beyond gone, enlightenment, hell. The Prajnaparamita mantra. Empty. Singulars are always empty. And so any notion of self comes from its relationship with others. And that's where characteristics come from. That's where perception comes from. Your model of reality is a perception, is information. It's meaning. Meaning comes from context. Context, like I always say, a metaphorical structure is a network of correlated concepts that create context from which meaning arises. So that metaphorical structure is a perception, is a self. And so without a context with the relationship with other things, selves have no meaning. And so the whole point was, I asked earlier, if you remember from so far ago, what's the code to convince everyone that they're one? Like Jesus says, I think it was in John chapter 17, I think around there, where Jesus prays for his disciples and he prays for the believers and I think non-believers as well. And he pleads to God, just have them love each other. Just love each other and be one. Be one with me, be one with God. Just be one. It's like he's pleading. And so when I look at things like dependent origination, which are the things that tell you that this notion of self is an illusion, that there is no self without relationship to others, and that all cells are dependently originated, it's telling you, like, this is another path to seeing how everything is one. And then once you see everything as one, and you see that you've always been part of the one, that you are the one, then nothing is attained. No attainment, no suffering, its origin, cessation, or the path. No wisdom and no attainment. And since nothing is attained, bodhisattvas maintain prajna paramita, and their heart is without hindrance. And since without hindrance, without fear, escaping upside down dreamlike thinking, and completely realizing nirvana, all Buddhas of all time maintain prajna paramita, thus obtaining anuttara samyak sambodhi. Hence know prajna paramita is an all-powerful mantra, a great enlightening mantra, an unexcelled, unequaled mantra able to dispel all suffering. This is true, not false. Therefore proclaim the prajna paramita mantra and recite the mantra thus. Om Gate Gate Peragate Parasamgate Bodhisvaha. See? Since nothing is attained, bodhisattvas maintain prajna paramita. The Vajra Prajna Paramita Sutra is telling you. What I'm saying is that the realization is that there's nothing to attain. That you are, like, once you come to that realization, all things that are always. It's the eternal connection to the things that don't arise and then cease. Things that are beholden to the law of impermanence, of life and death, the Four Noble Truths, the things that are impermanent, that are not eternal. Then once you know that everything is, that you are, that things are, and there's nothing to be attained. Once you understand that there's nothing that you have to do to be whole and to be connected to the one, once you understand that, to become whole and to become connected to the one, that's what letting go of all self is. So if there's no self, there's only a singular, there is only the one. There's no sentience. Sentience comes with a perception, with characteristics. Sentient beings, they require a relationship which requires more than one, which means that it's not singular. So both of these spirits, Christianity and Buddhism, are paths to the one based off pure relationships with all, pure loving relationships with all, which is the spirit of Christ, or a path to one where you let go of all selves, all relationships, just freedom, pure freedom. And from that letting go completely, all sense of a self dissipates, disappears, because you are dependently originated. So the self is all. There is no self without its relationship to others. So the self is all. If you try to find yourself, the singular, independent from the all, you'll only find emptiness. So just embrace the all by letting go of the self. Any selves. Because all selves, all minds are inherently relational. All minds are the result of a relationship between two minds. The duality, the splitting of the dual, taking up and down, and they are one. Subjectivity versus objectivity, they are one. Good and evil, they are one. If everything was good at all times, there'd be no reference to know what bad is. Without a reference to know what bad is, then you would not even be able to understand or acknowledge the concept of good, because there's nothing to contrast. It's the compare and contrast that creates information, that creates meaning, that creates context. You see what I'm saying? I really, really want you to hear what I'm saying. Like, understand that I have just spoken to pleas for people to take religion seriously by first beginning from my secular world, my secular gods, my secular reality, which is that of science and reason. That is what brought me to this point in my life, saying I was an atheist and dedicating my heart and soul to science and reason and truth. And from those, I find myself re-examining the spirit of Jesus Christ as an adult, as a mature person, and coming to the realization and conclusion that that is the spirit that made me, that allowed me to have the clarity of sight and the purity of heart to actually be able to explore and pursue those dreams with sincerity and love by maintaining good relationships with myself and others. Then once you understand that, and that it was given to you by the love of your parents, then you start examining the world with sincerity towards those who have religious views. And you do that, and you come across something like Buddhism, and you approach it with the same sincerity that you approached science and reason and truth. You approach it with the same sincerity as you do with your love for Christianity, and you ask yourself, what is the spirit? What is it saying? What is it asking? What is it giving? How does it program the universe? How does it program my mind if I give it access, if I let it create my reality? What does it do? It does the same thing as the Spirit of Christ. Christ has judged it. And his judgment is just, and his judgment says that if you can't tell the reflection of Christ in this spirit, then you don't know me. If you're just going based off of whether or not it's Christian, and that's the only way you can tell if something is Christian, you're just going off of characteristics. Both Jesus and Buddha, you don't judge based off of characteristics. Bodhisattvas did not give based off of characteristics. A bodhisattva who gives based off of characteristics is not a bodhisattva. It's like in John, when Jesus was being admonished for healing a man on the Sabbath. And he was like, you guys, I think it was, what's that thing where they nip the penis? God, what's it called? Circumcision. It's like, you guys perform circumcision on the Sabbath. I think that was his retort. He's like, stop judging things based off of characteristics. These things are shallow. That's why he's always admonishing the Pharisees too. Because the Pharisees do things based off of shallow understanding of the law by just doing what the law says in a mindless way. And so he's like, if you can't see why these things are loving and this is what you're supposed to be doing, then you're just judging based off of characteristics. You think you're righteous just because you're just following some rules. That's not righteousness. And so he tells them, don't judge things based off of characteristics. I think based off of how he speaks, you would feel as though people who do that do not know him. And so you have to trust Christ. And if you trust him and you don't walk around the world in fear, because you're not easily deceived. You're not delusional. If you are a Christian who has the Spirit of Christ, why do you walk in fear? It makes no sense. With your guard up. So when I go and I study something like Buddhism, I don't have my guard up. Why? Christ will judge. It'll be fine. And my relationship with Christ tells me that if I can't see the love in Buddhism, then I'm betraying him. It's a betrayal of self. To not see the truth and love in that religion is to be completely, I think, I don't know. I don't want to be too judgmental, but so here I am as a Buddhist Christian. Maybe I don't go to church and I don't go to a temple, Buddhist temple, but I do. I don't use these things as something to just be like, oh, like these things are practical tools. I use these things every single day in my life to be more grateful, to be more happy, to be less cynical all the time. These are just like part of it. Like just as I said earlier that I program, like I just turn things into math and that's just how my mind works. It's the same thing with Buddhism and Christianity. I have come into a moral quandary. I come into some instance in which, negative emotions are arising. And I'm asking myself, what negative roots did I put down to have that happen? I see my mind drifting into numbness. It's like, don't let Mara take your awareness. Don't let it distract you. And I find myself getting angry at people I love. The Spirit of Christ. You have to be able to take on, this Christ is a spirit that can take on any sin, and not be tainted by it. He purifies all sins. So if someone's committing sin against you or someone's committing sin against themselves and it bothers you, then sin is a betrayal of self or betrayal of others. Well, because they're dependently originated betrayal of others is a betrayal of self. But when someone is sinning, you don't just go and start wagging your finger at the sinner. You give them love. You have to just be able to let them be a sinner and just give them love without judgment. I think that if you are a person who judges harshly of others, what's it say in Matthew? The harsher you judge others, God will judge you twice as hard. If you go around talking about how someone's so stupid because they don't do this or that right, and then you find yourself doing the exact same thing, you can either now take the same critique and judgment that you gave on others and now, place it to yourself where it belongs because you've committed the same act, or you can lie to yourself about what you've done and go further into delusion, further away from the truth, be less pure, be delusional. If you really want to help someone, trying to correct their behavior by wagging your finger in their face is not going to help. Like, again, in this case, for all the atheists, listen to this. This is a sincere communication. Like, I hopefully you don't sense that there's any, because I wasn't even thinking too deeply about it. But yeah, this is this instance where I think I disagree with atheists. I don't think they really know what they're talking about. But I want to explain why in a way that doesn't invite their hearts to war. And so part of the thing, like I was saying, I need to do this podcast is because I feel like I want to be able to communicate things in a way that is reasonable. Reasonable. Yeah. And again, like if you listen to this and if you're an atheist and you listen to this and it makes you angry, I ask you this. Just please listen to my podcast. Just listen to a few episodes. Because everything I'm saying is placed in context. There's going to be things I said in here that I haven't defined or made clear, but they exist. The clarity exists. The context exists. I made this podcast so that when I say things, it means something very specific. And I would like to suggest that if you don't go and listen to the podcast before you allow your anger to grow inside of you, because someone is saying that they are a scientist and that they're Christian, they believe Christ is God, and that religions aren't stupid, and that, if you don't have a spiritual aspect to yourself, that you are taking a pillar of existence and you're just ignoring it, thus making yourself, thus seeing less, just blinding yourself. It's like cutting off your leg. Don't try to navigate the world with one leg if you don't have to. Don't cut off your leg. You need some spiritual guidance. You need some spiritual thought. You need to understand that there's more to the world than just material things. I mean, if you're an atheist who already understands that, then that's great. But I'm only suggesting that you take the concept of God sincerely. And you can take it sincerely just merely in the sense of this. If you're a good moral atheist who has a strong moral compass, which I believe there are many, and you are asking yourself, why do you have a strong moral compass? Well, it's because there are a set of things that you value, and those values are rules, and those rules are constraints, and those constraints create a space. See episode 4, season 1, Minds and Computer Algorithms, to understand what I mean. And those rules create a space. And then that space gives you a set of configurations or a set of actions that are available to you that are consistent with those rules. They're all symmetric with respect to the rules. It creates a boundary. And from that boundary comes a space, which is a realm. And the God of that realm is the spirit that you're in a relationship with. It's the thing that if you were to break your values would judge you and make you feel bad. That's the reason why you have morals. Because if you do something against your morals that you feel is unethical and wrong, then you will feel bad. Because you are in a relationship with the spirit of the realm of your perception. That is your God. It's the thing that you've exalted. The thing that you know that if you betray it, you'll feel guilty. It's the source of your guilt. Just think of it in this way. Because everything that I've just explained it's like, well, I'm using the word God. You might, oh, I don't want to use the word God for that. Yeah, I see what you're saying, but that's a loaded term, spirits, blah. This is what every atheist says, but it's like, yes, but the point is that I'm trying to communicate something to you. And so in this communication, I'm asking you to let me program this word the way that I see it, because the whole point is that I think that if you use the word in this way and you listen to religious people talk, you will feel more loving toward them, and your heart will open up and your anger will go away and you'll be happier. Just try it. I think I've probably talked long enough, kind of just going around covering grounds I've already covered before. Shout out to Kyle Gregg for sending me that video today. Kyle is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if you guys know what that is. And he sent me a video from someone, I think he said it was an apostle, or maybe someone who might become an apostle one day. I don't remember. But he gave a sermon about being loving. And, the tools of contention come from the book of Satan. It's like from the playbook of Satan, Satan's playbook, contention does, which is this idea of going and interacting with people with a heart at war, trying to address someone's sins by shaming them, by using harsh language. And the idea that avoiding the harsh language so that you can be loving to them asks more of us. And it's like, that's correct. It was very positive energy I got this morning. So I was thinking about that somewhat while going on this rant. So thanks, Kyle, for that. And that's another thing that I want to say too, is that as my friend, if you guys haven't known, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is Mormons, if you didn't know that. But which we had a conversation about that. But that's another thing where it's like, when you're someone who grows up in the world and you just hear about Mormons, you don't really, I think I had one professor who's Mormon. Other than that, you don't really communicate or interact with Mormons. So the perception of them is just whatever you get from society. So, and it's actually pretty interesting because you get a mixed bag. I mean, the general perception is something like their religion is crazy, but they're pretty nice people. It's typically like the general, just like perception of them that I've noticed. At least that's what I got from it. That's what I could tell just from existing on the earth. But when you go and you talk to someone, like I think most people agree, like a lot of people, like just living in a world before I had my close Mormon friend, it was one of those things where it was clear you just kind of mocked them. Their beliefs, at least we're not, at least we don't believe Joseph Smith or whatever. And that's just kind of how people tend to think of them, I think. But this whole thing, what I was saying about being sincere and just kind of like listening sincerely, it's like, well, I mean, if you just talk to them sincerely, they're actually really nice people. Really, I mean, at least the one I know, very loving. I feel like a lot of times we'll be talking about Christianity, and he has some pretty insightful things to say about Jesus, and it's the things he has me read about that the church writes about certain ideas seem to make a lot of sense. I don't know. And I can only imagine for an atheist to hear that, the idea of giving Mormons a fair chance is just probably completely like, oh my God, this guy is an idiot. They might be thinking, yeah, I guess. I don't know. I got a pretty good dose of love from listening to one of their sermons today. So I don't know what you want from me. Made me happy. It reminded me to be loving to my wife. So I don't know. It's up to you. Live your life how you want. For sure. I have no interest in demanding anything from anybody. I just ask that you give me an open ear and listen sincerely. Like, I want to study so many religions. I want to study Islam, Hinduism. I want to get all the love, all the truth. Take religion seriously, guys. Anyway, that's enough. Peace.